I'm Mark G.E. My film is Phantom Limb. It's a satirical noir about a possible serial killing limb.
We've known each other for a number of years. We worked together at a now defunct cable station, MATA.
Right.
You had a TV show, Joy Farm, on MATA,
Right.
and primarily a sketch show, right? But you did longer form narratives as well.
Yeah. It was definitely a sketch show, but it was the way we described it was that it was a sketch show that was sort of a combination of Monty Python meets The Twilight Zone meets David Lynch.
And
so it had a dark sensibility to it and was but was also satirical, and we would switch between that.
And this came out of that,
yeah. So we had this group, and at some point we were, I think, just kind of doing a sketch comedy show, which was satirical sketches, a lot about like Second City, a lot of television spoofs. And then that ended up being sort of genre spoofs, where we would do a sci-fi or something like that. And in this case, we had come across this idea of doing a noir film and doing a satirical noir. And so we were trying to ride that line between, a lot of Joy Farm had that sort of hammy on purpose acting, which was satirical acting. I mean, the actors that we had were quite capable, and you've used many of them for drama. But they also had usually an appreciation, sort of a satirical underbelly to a lot of things. So we definitely were trying to sort of have it both, at least both ways, which was to do film spoofs perhaps on genres that we admired and loved, but then also kind of keep that Joy Farm sensibility, where we were making fun of it at the same time. And some of them maybe were way too hammy, and other ones were maybe way too dark and serious. You try to find somewhere in the middle there.
Now it's just under like 30 minutes. Was this meant to be just a half-hour one, or did you fit MATA's time restraints there? Because it feels like it wanted to be a little bit longer at times to me.
Yeah, I definitely knew that we had this half-hour program and we had to meet those time constraints. So when we wrote it and put it together, it was put together to fit in as a kind of a special half-hour episode, television episode. Yeah, so there were, as you know, there were a lot of sort of wacky, colorful sketches, but then I have a long history of doing sort of dark, black and white sort of work, and which I call the dark works. And this was one of those. It was just more of a long form attempt at trying to do something. And 95 particular, I think we did this in 1995, was for us a year that we had done a number of things like this, where we were playing with the idea of whether we were really like a theater company and we were going to maybe do things eventually theatrically. It was the year, I think, where Fox came calling, a producer called and was wanting to see us live, and we really didn't have a live troupe at the time. So we were kind of playing with the idea about, are we starting to do this live, or what is this? So there was a lot happening for us in this year that we made this film, which was everything from potentially, are we going to dream big and go somewhere beyond this and maybe do a sketch comedy show for Comedy Central, or for Fox, or are we going to do things live here? Because at the same time, I think the Dead Alewives were doing some live things with and you know those folks.
Yeah.
And so there was a lot happening here in terms of sort of like satirical troops. There was a lot of energy going on, and we felt we were part of that, and we wanted to see where we could take it. So that's what we were up to at the time when we did this.
Yeah, I seem to recall at that time there was an explosion of sketch comedy, like a renewed interest in it,
Mhm.
because you didn't really see much of it after like Saturday Night Live kind of like fell aside a little bit creatively, and SCTV kind of went off the air. But then you saw things like The State, you saw things like God, the name escapes me, Kids in the Hall.
Kids in the Hall. Maybe
Yeah,
Ben Stiller was kind of doing something around that time, though
yeah,
I didn't really see that until a bit later. You know, when it was people would refer to it. So there were a number of sketch comedies like that. I think that might have been on HBO or Showtime or something, and I didn't have that, so I didn't see them until later. Mr. Show,
yeah,
maybe.
Mr. Show.
Oh,
Um, I think Amy Poehler did something too with her company out in New York.
oh yeah, that's right. Upright Citizens Brigade.
Yeah, Upright Citizens Brigade. There was 90s became like a renewed interest in just satirical comedy.
Yeah,
And
and there was this sort of irony that was going on and an understanding of satire. And one of the things that I found that I talk about kind of recently is in my band Exposed Foreheads, we have maybe sort of some of the satirical lyrics like Devo would. And so I had an opportunity when our band played Devotional to talk to Jerry Casale, one of the founders of Devo, about writing satire. And I said to him, like, what do you think about this now in this day and age, writing satire? And his answer was, satire's dead. So, and he may be right. There's a lot of times now that I feel like perhaps the place Phantom Limb and Joy Farm and all of my roots come from may not be appreciated. Maybe by a certain generation it is, but by
yeah,
maybe a younger generation, it just may not really be appreciated by as many people as it used to be.
yeah,
They kind of came into being this very sincere thing that would happen, and we clearly our determination to be good, do good art was sincere, but the content was satirical.
yeah,
You know, and I think that came out of the whole 70s idea of getting, you know, of trying to go against whatever the man was doing or whatever the establishment was doing. So it was
yeah.
still a sense of anti-establishment. I'm not really sure what anti-establishment means anymore.
Well, it's sort of like the people who were growing up in the 70s and followed Monty Python, SNL, they were turning into the creators in the 90s.
Yeah, yeah,
You know, they were
right,
they were able to be in those positions to do that kind of thing.
right,
What
right.
what I like about your film is, as a festival programmer, I get a ton of films every year, and there's always some filmmakers who do film noir, but it's all surface level stuff. They got the suits, the hats, they do the Venetian blind lighting, and they
Yeah,
do it in black and white, and they think that's just noir. But this really goes into the psychological aspects and kind of digs into the pulp aspects of noir as well. And that's
thank
what I
you.
like about your film.
Oh, thank you. Now, you know that I'm a fan of noir, and I'm particularly a fan of black and white films. So, I
Mm-hmm.
mean, if you watched, as you know, many films that I've done, I go back, to the 20s of trying to be like Vampire, Dreyer, and those kind of films, as well as stuff in the 30s and 40s and 50s. I love it. But how I came to do black and white is interesting. I don't know if I ever told you about it,
No.
but basically, when we were all working on U-matic, doing 3/4 inch U-matic, if you remember, reds in particular look pretty crappy.
Yeah.
And so a lot of times color didn't look good, and it did on your maybe master, but then by the time you had to, dub it onto another tape and another tape to air,
Mm-hmm.
the reds would bleed and look
Yeah.
horrible. And
It was
so,
it was a very primitive system we were working in.
right. And so I started thinking about how do I have more control over this? And so black and white was an option, which was I could make everything really crisp. And then, of course, when you make it in black and white, that leads you to how am I lighting? how am I lighting this? And that, you know, how do you get the blacks really black and the whites white? And how do you get grays to be gray? And what shows up in black and white? And so it becomes this whole learning process of how
Yeah.
to use black and white. How, and then that gets into the issue of composition, shot composition, and where do you put people in a shot, right?
Mhm.
And where, how are you blocking people? And what kind of angles are you using? And of course, Toland and Citizen Kane and all of that figures
Yeah.
into it too. So, and then, I mean, there's a bit even with, I think for some of my stuff with Batman 66, which isn't vivid color, but there's these angled
Dutch
shots that
angles.
are
Yeah.
being used. I love that. So, but yeah, I didn't come to black and white really just as you would might think, which is I love black and white. I'm going to make a black and white film. It was more like, how could I control the fact that color looks so poor on U-matic?
What I find interesting about your film is I know the process in which you made it with the old U-matic tapes, and that is primarily your final version is going to be a dub of a dub.
Right.
Because you're editing tape to tape, but your film doesn't look like it's a dub from a dub. It still looks sort of close to first generation. So did you edit this in order as well?
No, I shot it on those little 20-minute U-matics and
Yeah.
then edited it and then made a master, because then you had two tracks of audio, the music on one and the talking on the other.
Yeah.
And so no, it's third generation, isn't it?
It looks a little bit better than third generation. It does.
That might be your Blu-ray version of it. Look, you did a nice job with that. Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I did want to speak a little bit about the soundtrack, though, if I could.
Sure. Yeah.
So John Kruth did the soundtrack. We met when he did some performance art music in Milwaukee, and I went and talked to him, and he immediately, we talked about soundtracks, and he loved the Third Man soundtrack, as do I. And we knew that we should work together. So I invited him to ask him if he'd do it, and he was gracious enough to do it. And the cello that's in there actually is a cellist from the Melbourne Symphony Orchestra from Australia. Yeah.
Oh.
So, you know, John knows an awful lot of interesting people, and he can poll people. And so that was real fun and something I don't think anybody knew. But we worked together. You know, he wrote the whole thing, and then we basically showed scenes, and then they played live to the scenes,
like
the old-fashioned way. And then I edited that all together to make it work. But I think I just want to give kudos to John Kruth, because he just did a phenomenal job on the soundtrack.
It's a great score. Fantastic score.
Yeah.
So let me ask you one last question here, because I know Matt has restrictions. And if anyone doesn't know what organization we're talking about, it's Matta Telecommunications Authority back in the 90s. They've been gone for about, I think, 10 years now, but it was public access.
Yeah.
And you could only take out equipment for a certain time to shoot a project, and you only had a certain amount of time to edit a project too. So what I find interesting is there's a lot of coverage in this, and you're going to a lot of locations. I don't know how you fit this into their time restraints.
Well, I think it was at least 3 shoots, right? There's the church shoot. That would have been one day. And then there was all the stuff in the houses and the basements and the things.
Did you use one house and just move to different rooms?
Most of it was my house in the River West at the time on Fratney. And just moved in different rooms. And then there would have been that outside shot with that bike path that I don't think exists anymore over there near Humboldt. In the River West.
And there's like a warehouse scene of some kind, or maybe I don't know if it is.
There may have been at least 4 shoots for this. Now that I think about it.
Oh wow, they must have been pretty long days, because I know lighting like that can take a little bit of time.
Yeah, Right. I mean, we would usually start around 10 a.m. shooting in earnest, like
Mhm.
my wife and I would be up earlier than that trying to get things set, but usually around 10 a.m. and we would shoot well past 6. We had a machine going. So we were shooting most Saturdays, and then we also had writers' meetings once or twice a week. So it was it was at least a part-time job. And then, as you know, I was there every Friday editing. So,
Yeah,
it was a good 4 hours. I think I did a 4-hour shift every Friday. So to get that done, I probably did it over a couple months and had something else going on online. I mean, not online, on the air at the time.
yeah.
But yeah. So, but we were pretty efficient. I mean, everybody knew their parts. They knew the script. We kind of didn't have a lot of fooling around. We would just get it done, and we probably shot usually 2 to 3, because you remember it was on tape. So
Yeah.
being on tape, something would glitch. So you always had that safety tape,
Mhm.
you'd have them do it, and then you'd have them do it again. And then maybe you had them do it one more time.
Yeah.
So
Well, thank you so much for joining me today, and thank you for allowing us to show your film again. Your film showed at our very first film festival, which was on MATA, not in the movie theater, and now it's going to be projected on a big 30-foot screen.
awesome. Ross, thank you so much for honoring the film. I mean, it's certainly something that means a lot to me, so I appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, thank you.